All right, welcome back to another edition of Truth Seekers. I'm excited about tonight's guests and also our topic today. So we have, of course, Coach Nick Davies, we have Dan Greco, and myself, Josh Greco. And today's topic is personal development, one of my favorite topics, maybe the most important topic that we'll ever cover on Truth Seekers, because the applications to self-development are broad-ranging, universal. It applies to everybody. I think it's very interesting, the whole topic of working on self and improving yourself, because that way you can improve others as well. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dan Greco. Dan, any initial thoughts on self-development? There's a wider range or a number of ways we can take this conversation. You kick it off for us.
It's funny, I was waiting for you to do the same thing, so you're putting it on me. But I think what you pointed out in the beginning is right on, at least for me. So much flows outward from self-development or grows out of it. And when you're working on yourself, it impacts just about everything else. I kind of think of a metaphor like a machine that's got inputs and an output. And if you keep putting in the same inputs through the same machine, you're going to get the same output. So if you want a new output, rewire that machine, which you're the machine, right? The way you take things in, the way you experience them, think about them, you've got to change how that goes, or you're going to continue to get that shredded piece of paper out the shredder. If you want it to print, you got to build it to be a printer. And I think same thing for the inputs. You could also change those. If you don't like where your life is at or what you're getting out of it, change what you're taking in. I could go into some examples there, but I ramble, so I'm going to try not to ramble today.
Well, that's what this is about, coming up with real life examples. So we can do that. I think it was Einstein who said we can't change the processes in our lives with the same consciousness that put them there. I butchered that a little bit, but that's basically the gist of it. So tell me, like, that sounds like a challenging thing to do then. How do you change your input? How do you change your level of consciousness to produce something else?
Yeah, so I think, again, it's like the two things. You can change the input or change the processing of it, and they're tied together. But I mean, the input can be as simple as I wanted to grow and get more out of life and learn things. I like to learn things. I like to read. And I stopped at some point and reflected and looked back that I was popping on Netflix after work and just watching reruns of Friends or Parks and Recreation, things I've already seen. Like, what am I getting out of life by doing that? So, stop that input and start reading a book, listen to a podcast, learn something, right? And it's that simple as taking control of what you're putting into your life, just like your diet. It could be that. What are you putting into your body? What are you putting in your mind, and cultivating that way?
Yeah, I think there's a delicate balance between growth, and it almost seems like we are seeking a comfort level in our lives, right? We want to be comfortable and get to a certain point, either financially or spiritually or whatever, to be okay and to kind of shield ourselves from the outside world. Coach Nick, talk to me about the difference between comfort level and growth, and how can you toe that line?
There's a very distinct dichotomy here with all of these things. At the foundation premise, I believe that we do things for one of two reasons. It's either to avoid pain or to move towards pleasure. If you think about this on a very simple scale, 0 is maximum, or 1 is maximum pain, and 10 is maximum pleasure. We're always somewhere on this scale. Now, we can do it as a overview of our life, where we are overall, but we can also break it down to categories of our life, because you could be a 7 or an 8 in your business, but you could be a 2 and a 3 in your health, for instance. And the lower you are on the scale, the more you are associated to the pain, the more that will motivate you to do something about it. And then the closer you are to the absolute ultimate pleasure, the more that will compel you to continue to move forward. The danger zone, the place that no one wants to be, that a place that, like, people often most are, is the in-between stuff. It's like the 3 to the 7 range. That's the comfort zone.
It's not enough to be uncomfortable at that point, right?
Right, because you could, if you think about, if you keep that visual in your head and you think about that scale, and you think about a box around like the 3 and the set to the 7, like that, in a box of that scale, you can think of it like a meter. That you can bounce off the bottom. So if you go down and you hit a 2 or a 1, that's enough pain to get you up to a 3 or a 4. I've got to do something. I've got to do something. I've got to do something out of it. You get back to your comfort zone. But then if you don't keep going, you've got no compelling future. You're just going to sit in your comfort zone. And the natural order of life is to get worse, not better. So you start to get back down to that pain again. And then when it gets too painful, you do something about it. You spend your life just going from it's just okay to it's terrible. Just okay, terrible.
I like that analogy, Dan. Does that work the same for the top level? Sometimes we can't get out of our own way to be more successful. Do you find that to be true?
Yes, I think anything you're doing outside of that box takes effort, right? So to push yourself through that pain back to what Coach Nick was talking about takes effort. But I also think like he said, the natural order of things is to pull you down. I think that's uniform. So if you're at a 9 or a 10, you're still getting pulled slowly down back into that box. And it's a lot easier to go, all right, well, that was fun. And now I'm just going to kick my feet up. But to keep pushing and try to stay up on the plus side of that scale is in different ways can be just as challenging as getting up from the bottom, I think.
It almost goes back to our discussion with Dr. Nunnery about almost like seeking on a daily basis to be uncomfortable, looking for those situations. And that's challenging, right? So I don't know, do you do that, Dan? How would you go about that in your everyday life?
So a big word I think it's thrown around a lot that it's been pertinent for me, so I've been throwing it around a lot, is being intentional. If you want these things, if you want to be better, it takes effort to do it, and you're not going to just naturally happenstance your way into effort. You've got to intentionally plan for it, accommodate for certain fallbacks. Like if you know you like to watch Netflix, put something in the way that makes it hard for you to watch Netflix, or when you're about to take that moment and stop. But you've got to be intentional. At least I've had to, and I've found success, writing things out that I want to do, which is another expanse we could go into, is writing. But finding some way to take control, because if you leave it to chance, it's going to pull you down.
Yeah, you're like a leaf in the wind, right? If you don't have intention, you're living in somebody else's life or living out somebody else's goals. All right, so writing it out. Coach Nick, what are maybe a couple other ways to be intentional? How can people seek moving away from that comfort level and embracing uncomfortability?
So many ways, like the biggest thing, like thank you, Dan, because attention is massive, right? And I just tie it back to your early point about Netflix and watching Friends. I love to watch our reruns of Friends. That's awesome. I've watched too many that I like to care of. But you can also think about the intention on the other side of it as well. As long as you can say to yourself, because there's nothing inherently wrong with watching Friends, right? So you can say to yourself, look, my intention here is to watch Friends now. I'm going to watch 2 episodes back to back, maybe even 3, with no commercials. That's not too long. I'm going to do that because I want to spend the time. That's my intentional time. But the difference is that adding that intention in is just knowing what you're using that time for, because otherwise it disappears. But it's an association, Coach, to answer your question, right? It's association to using both those that pain and the pleasure to get you to where you want to be. Because when you've got enough pain, you'll take the action. And as soon as you get in the comfort zone, as you said, Dan, you're going to kick back and go, oh, I'm all right now. But the things that you were doing, if you continue to do them, would get you to the better place. And the more that you do that, the more that you can see that where the better place is, see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right? So it's enough to be like sitting in the sand and don't want to move anywhere, and then suddenly see like scorpions walking up to you to give you enough potential pain to jump up and start walking. It's another thing to look out across the Sahara and see a mirage of something you're actually moving towards. Right? That's the pain and the pleasure. So you've got to have those dual forces working for you all the time. How do you do that? To your point, Dan, absolutely write it down. You've got to see it. You've got to see it. You've got to know about it. You've got to be associated with it. And that's why I get so passionate about this, because this is why coaching is so important, because it's having a way every single week to know that this is my time. If everything else goes wrong this week, I know I'm going to come in and I'm going to check in. I've got my time. I've got my 30 minutes. I've got my 45 minutes. I've got my hour maybe, where I can get reset and make sure that I am going where I want to be going and have a compelling reason for the future. and have that continue to pull you forward. Did you guys ever get told, like, when you were growing up, oh, it's out of sight, out of mind? You ever hit that?
Oh yeah.
It's true, right? You forget about it. And same thing for our goals. It could be the most compelling, most exciting goal, or the most pain that you want to get away with. If it starts to be not associated with you, you start to forget it. It loses its power. And the thing is, the difference between the pain and the pleasure is that the pain is usually now. So you have to do something about it. It asserts itself. Whereas the pleasure is always something down the road. So you have to bring it to you. It won't come to you, but the pain will. So you've got to use both of those together, because if it's outside, out of mind, then the converse must be true, inside, in mind. So you've got to be able to see it. You've got to keep it in your mind. You've got to have, and this is why these type of conversations are important, right? Because it's not that all of these things and people listening to this, watching this, they're not going to go, oh, that's a completely new concept. What they are going to go is, oh, I get it because I'm reminded of it. We don't need the new concepts. We just need to be reminded of what we naturally need to do.
Pleasure will come to us if we sit there, or I'm sorry, pain will come to us if we sit there, but not pleasure. I think that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Dan, Nick said a lot. Give me some feedback here.
So,
So one
No,
thing
I'm saying I have so many thoughts of what you said. I'm sure Dan does as well.
Yeah, one thing that stuck out to me there, that I have thought about recently, heard about recently, is that pain is now, pleasure is always somewhere off in the future. And I think it can be expanded to, when you're training for, say, a marathon, say, some type of physical goal you want to get to. You want to run a mile in 6 minutes, which I can personally relate to, and I know Josh can too. The effort it takes to push yourself there, it's not that one time, that one race. It's the habits, it's the journey, it's continually intentionally pushing yourself so that day you can run your mile in under 6 minutes. And yeah, it feels good that day, but it feels good when you kind of look back on the experience of all the habits you created and the development of yourself that took place. It's not so much about the 6 minutes, because that 6 minutes is now done. That day, that race is over. Like, is your pleasure gone? No, because you've built up towards it with all those habits. I think it's the same with self-development and other things, right? We talk about it's about the journey. There's not necessarily an end in mind. That's abstract, but it's also true. And with any of these elements we put this thinking into, I think it holds, where as you create that intentional effort of pushing towards pleasure, you're going to find yourself regularly pushing towards pleasure. And you don't know what that pleasure might be, but it's going to keep pushing in the right directions.
Yeah, ultimately, it's who we become. We do things to become more, not for the goal itself. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff in there. Thank you for sharing that. So, what if I'm a person that is okay with being comfortable? I'm okay with where I am. What advice would you have, Nick, or would you have any at all?
Which makes me shudder, scares the life out of me. It's like this comfort zone is the most scary thing.
Why?
Follow me on this, Josh. I know you like. I know right now is not the case, but I know that you like to have a drink sometimes and have done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, do you like to have a drink every now and again? Are you
I'm trying to get away from it, but I can go with you on this one.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in a similar place, right? Like,
yeah.
Here's the thing, right? So you can be completely focused on look, I'm not drinking for this period of time. I'm not drinking for this month, this quarter, whatever it is, or you could just be saying, I'm going to have, all right, one drink in this evening or one drink tonight, and that person before you have the drink is so sure and convinced that it's only going to be that one drink. So sure, convinced, and then you have the drink, and you can still see that same person with that completely certain viewpoint of not having enough drink, but you're not the same person anymore. It's gone. And that's the same with the comfort zone. When you're in it, you can't see it. That's why I get so scared of it. Because when you're in it, you are comfortable, so you don't care. If you are worried about being in the comfort zone, you've got enough pain to not be in it. If you are comfortable kicking back, and this comes in like waves, even through the day, through moments where sometimes you'll be like, I'm all right, staring out the window, right? And then the next minute you're like, oh, I need to get on and do something here, because you can remind yourself of that. So I think it's a worrying place to be, the comfort zone, right? And I would start to think about, and people, I start to think about what you really might want, because people tend to set themselves up for being in the comfort zone by saying it's okay. Like, this is my lot. This is the only thing I'm capable of. This is just what happened to me. This is how I grew up. This is just who I want to be. And all of those things just to protect themselves in the moment for feeling like they're not enough or not good enough.
Mm.
And it's never a question of capability. There's no judgment here at all, because everyone's the same. Everyone's in the same has the same potential. Like, as humans, our potential is pretty much unlimited. Look at the things we've done over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's crazy. Human potential is pretty much unlimited. So it's just a case of getting stuck in those patterns and getting in the comfort zone. And it's let's break out of them. Let's figure out what it is that you want really, not just what you think you can get based on what you have at the moment. Like, how can I get that 10% raise? Well, what if you just threw away in that job and you started to do a job or a business that you actually wanted to do, that you could really get juiced about, that you could get up early and stay up late to do? What about that? What if? Not what if it's like the good life, but what about if it's the dream life? And we just get used to not asking those types of questions.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, right? Either society or ourselves can convince ourselves that we're not worthy of it, or we can't achieve that. That's where that self-development comes in. And to your point, Nick, I think that's why I love coaching as well, because you get to draw that out of people. That it's almost like screaming to come out of people, and, and sometimes they don't know that until they're in that space where they can have that conversation. And that's the case for myself as well. The best coaches, Nick and I'm sure you and I can attest to this, in our company especially, have coaches as well. Like, we coach each other all the time. So it's just being comfortable in that space to share, sometimes personal things about what's holding us back from, or what's allowing us to accept our comfort level as the way we think things should be, when there's so much more potential for us.
And I think to expand on Coach Nick's point there about, there's no judgment, and you guys are coaches. I'm the kind of person that, I think we all want to grow and get better, and we're kind of, if you want to round up just a little bit, we might be fanatical about it, right? It's big about trying to get better, and there are people who may not be so fanatical, but life is so multifaceted. There's something that you want to get better at. You wish were a little healthier, a little better in your life, and this intentional effort of self-development can apply to that. Otherwise, I think you'd be like the enlightened Buddha reincarnate or something like it. There's got to be something.
So for that person, how can you help them find that one thing, Dan? What, like, if they don't know what it is, what would be one step they can take to, almost on like a discovery path for what that might be?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways. Like, I would think about either thinking about, and again, writing about my future and what I want that to look like, or thinking about and writing about my past and what that has looked like. And for me, that's both been really helpful to see some places that misaligned with what I'm feeling inside, and maybe didn't realize that how bad I was wanting something, or how misaligned. Again, that Friends example for me, there's nothing wrong with watching Friends, but if you're somebody who wants to grow and wants to learn and get better and do great things, and you're spending 5 days a week watching 4 hours of Friends, what's not adding up here? But taking that time to do that exercise, maybe they'll write about it and realize as they're writing, like, oh yeah, I want to spend more time with my kids, or I wish I, had different personal connections where maybe my work life is great, but my personal life's not, or flip that, or anything else.
There's something super intentional about writing, right? If you maybe that's the recommendation. Sit down and just start writing something. Like, what the heck are you going to write? But once you write that first sentence, then you start to grow a vision of where your writing is going to go. And then it kind of takes on a life form of itself, whether that's about the past or the future, or even the present, what you're going through right now. Some of those things can really bring to light, like, some things that have been dormant for a long time. And I think that could be very important on each person's journey.
And even just fleshing things out, what I found is, like, there's things, I keep harping on that one example, but like I kind of always knew that, always knew I felt that way and had those thoughts like, oh, I should be doing more. I should be doing more. But
Yeah.
when I wrote it and I read my writing and felt that as I did it, it just became real that it nudged me into action. Right. So I think, like you said, it's real. When you write, it's real. You could do a free form, you could find prompts, but when you put those words down and read what you wrote, it's a lot harder to miss it, to lie to yourself, or that doesn't apply to everybody, but just to not be aware of it if it's written down.
So you did bring the future to now, right? So you said by writing it down, you can associate yourself with that future and the possibility of that future not happening. Also the compelling version of it that could be possible, which then pushed you into action because it was like,
Right.
okay, here it is. And that we just said that's the process, right? That's it. Like it's keeping it in front of you. It's like it's creating it. It's like your brain doesn't know the difference between what you tell it is vividly true than what it actually is true in reality. That's why doing visions and visuals is so powerful.
Perception is reality.
Perception is reality. It's like your brain will get you there quicker if you know what it is, and also the more precise it is. And it's just about going on the journey. It's like, well, okay, I want to have lots of money. All right. Or how much money? And by when? What does it really look like? And every time you ask a question, you get a bit more detail, you get a bit more clarity, you get a bit more precision. And then once you get to a point where it's just so damn clear, you can't help but move towards it. And that is a process, though. You're not going to, just like you're not going to get smashed in your face by the pleasure of the future just appearing in front of you. You're not going to get smashed in your face by that absolute clear goal that you want, like the best thing in the world. Oh, here it is. I just stumbled upon the perfect thing that I want. This is what I've always been looking for. You've got to, back to your point, Dan, you've got to be intentional about creating that for yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
We could probably talk all night about this topic, but I really enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot of stuff to digest about self-development and what we can do to move in the right direction. And I guess maybe the last thing to mention would be it's a constant thing, right? So you can set a goal for yourself or an intention to move forward towards something, but also that reassessment is part of that personal development to make sure that you're on the right track, to make sure that the direction that you're moving you truly want. And maybe you don't want it 6 months from when you set that, but maybe you're on the path now to a new goal that you can set and be intentional about. So it's all encompassing. Like I said, we could talk for hours about this, but I just wanted to thank you guys for tonight's conversation and participation. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. And Coach, just
For
before we
having us.
I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, I just said thanks for having me on.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I guess before we wrap it up then, Josh, what would be some tangible takeaways for anyone who's listening and watching?
Sure. So, I mean, what I'm hearing, the major theme is to be intentional. Be intentional, or at least be intentional about starting to find what you want. And that can come in many different forms. Like Dan says, it can be writing, it can be on your own. Bring somebody else in, talk to a friend, talk to a coach, have a conversation about the things that you want, because you awaken certain things inside of yourself that you, like Dan said, to be true. You've thought these thoughts before. For whatever reason, there's some blockage. Shake it loose by talking to somebody else.
Shake it loose. Yeah, I love it.
Shake it loose.
Yeah, you haven't got to be brilliant to start, but you have got to start to be brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. You do whatever it is you can be intentional about starting. I love it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys. We'll wrap it up there. Appreciate it. Another edition of Truth Seekers. Thank you for participating.